45 years ago, a group of Wofford students ventured to Prague for interim despite the recent invasion by the Soviets. Their trip took place at the very beginning of the communist occupation of Czechoslovakia, placing the students in the country at a critical point in history. This year, a group of Wofford students returned to Prague to relive their predecessor's trip, to learn about the history of Prague, and to examine the differences after the Velvet Revolution.
At times, it seems as if the Wofford trip to Prague in 1969 was destined to be involved in some of the most important areas of Czechoslovak history. On January 16, 1969, Charles University student Jan Pollock self-immolated in Wenceslas Square, and members of the 1969 trip were present. 45 years later, our group visited Wenceslas Square to leave a memorial for Jan Pollock at the location of his self-immolation. More strangely, the 1969 group was also able to have an interview with an economist, Professor Rita Budanova. Professor Budanova spent some of her childhood in New York, but in her teenage years, she returned to Prague with her family. She eventually taught economics at Charles University. However, she was removed from this honorable position in 1970 following the Soviet invasion. In 1978, she remarried and became Rita Klimova. The name change must have been enough to disguise Professor Klimova from the Wofford group of 1969 because she carried on to be an impressive figure in Czechoslovak politics. In November 1989, Rita Klimova served as an interpreter for Václav Havel and developed the persona of the spokesperson for the Velvet Revolution. Just a few months later, in February 1990, she became the first ambassador of democratic Czechoslovakia to the United States. Professor Klimova's time as the ambassador was short-lived. She stepped down from the position in 1992 and passed away from leukemia on December 30th, 1993. She was survived by a son and a daughter.
By good fortune, the Wofford group traveling to Prague this year was able to contact Professor Klimova's daughter, Milena Bartlová. Professor Bartlová honored Dr. Natalie Grinnell, Dr. Mark Burns, Jessica LeGrand, and Natasha Rudy with a lunch meeting, and she later met with the students for a brief interview. Professor Bartlová was born in 1958 in Prague, and she was still living in Prague when the Soviets invaded. She continued the family tradition of obtaining a doctorate, making her the third-generation female to receive a doctoral degree. Since 2005, Professor Bartlová has been a professor in the Department of Art History at Masaryk University. Here, we show the interview she provided as we asked her about her family, herself, and her nation. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
I'm now, and I'm an art historian. I'm professor teaching at the university, which was not easy to attain this position. First of all, because my family belonged to those who were persecuted under the previous regime, and that meant I was not allowed to study at the university. Finally, I managed to study sort of externally, in an external way, but then I was not allowed to travel outside of the country. I was not allowed to publish anything. So everything started only after the revolution in 1989, but at that time I had two kids, two very small kids. That means that my career was really a lot of hard work, which was sort of made easier by the fact that I am, in my family, I am the third generation PhD woman, which is quite something that helps one in this situation. As of now, I'm still the first female professor in my area, that means in art history in Czech Republic, which again shows how all those quite obvious gender troubles make one's career even more difficult than it was because of the politics. So I'm one of those people who had to work extremely hard, but well, I'm this kind of person that I don't think it's bad.
Please tell us a little bit about your family history, especially during the Soviet occupation.
In the summer we were in a country, but as soon as the Soviets arrived, the members of my family became very they got quite afraid that the Soviets might act similarly to what they did in 1945, and that they might try to take to kidnap people away somewhere to the Soviet Union, to Russia, because my grandfather, that means my mother's father, came from what then was Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. In 1921 they arrived to Prague. So they became quite afraid, and within a week we left for an attempt at emigration. We went to Vienna and then to Glasgow, where my mother had one semester teaching at the Glasgow University. But in the middle of December we came back because my grandfather decided that he does not want to emigrate for the third time in his life. What has to be added is that my father was at that time a member of the closest circle of the Politburo of the Communist Party. That means that he was the one who was taken to Moscow with the rest of with a very small group of politicians who were detained in Moscow and then forced to sign the so-called Moscow protocols. You can find it out what that is. And so my father was there in this situation, and my mother and my grandfather, with whom I have lived with my brother, we have left abroad because my parents have been already divorced by the time.
Please tell us about the progression of your mother's career.
She met the American students because she was the only one in her generation who could speak very well English, because she spent her childhood years in New York during the war. And after the spring, I mean after April 1969, when the strict political turnover was realized in this country, she was forced to leave her university teaching post in such a way that because she was divorced with 2 children. According to the law at that time, they were not allowed to fire her, but they had to offer her an alternative job inside the same organization. That means she was offered the job of an accountant at the university and later the cleaning lady. That means that she left herself. And afterwards, until she retired in 1988, she made her money by translating. She translated a lot of technical manuals and such thoroughly unintellectual material. And then when she retired, she started to work more for the dissident movement, and she did a lot of translation for Václav Havel in 88 and the first half of 89, and that is why she was during the revolution of 1989. She was always in the smallest group of leaders because she was helping with the translation. And before Christmas 1989, she was offered to serve as the ambassador of then it was Czechoslovakia still, the ambassador of Czechoslovakia to the United States. And she went there in the middle of February 1990, just before Václav Havel's first state visit to the United States. and she thus became the first female ambassador of this country. And she spent 2 more years there, and then unfortunately died of leukemia.
What was your most vivid memory from your time during the Soviet occupation?
In the context we were talking here about, the most vivid, one of the very strong memories is the early August morning when the message arrived about the Soviet troops invading the country. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning in August. The sun was rising. That's a very strong memory, how the sun was rising. Usually I was not awake at that time. And someone went banging on the door of the room where we slept in a small country hotel with the cry, "Soviets are here." And nobody wanted to understand it first. Well, I was a kid, but the grown-ups didn't want to understand. They couldn't manage. And then there was the week, the days afterwards were quite interesting for me as a still small kid, because the grown-ups completely left us alone. Nobody cared for us. They just gave us something to eat. And nobody cared for us. Everybody was sitting glued to the TV. All the people, all the grown-ups together, and we just could do anything. We just could leave, and the troops were passing through a highway which could be seen from the village where we were. So this was an extremely strong memory. I believe that everybody in Czechoslovakia could tell you what was he doing in the morning of August 21st. So this is a very vivid memory, if this is what may interest you.
Yeah.
What prominent changes have you noticed since becoming a free and independent nation? Do you still think more changes should be made?
The most profound changes, it's difficult to say because almost everything has changed. Almost everything. As of these days, the new Codex of Civil Law has come into how to say it, into practice, and that sort of changes really everything. The completely new Code of Civil Law, which is a completely new way of arranging things. For someone like me, that means an intellectual, a scholar, and so on, the most important thing is, of course, what is called freedom. Freedom to travel, freedom to speak, freedom to publish, everything. But I know very well that such people as me are a small minority in this society, any society. For very many people and for the majority of people, this kind of freedom is not the most important thing they have. The most important things concern their well-being, their securities, how they feel, if they feel as valuable people in society, and so on. And this has not definitely improved that much as would be that much that we could say, well, it's great. It is not. Not only the crisis, but above all both the political and economical state of Czech Republic is not in a good shape. There is too much of political corruption, economic corruption, and so on, and there's quite a strong sentiment feeling growing among the middle and lower strata of the society that freedom is not the most important thing. And unfortunately, the neo-Nazi or neo-fascist power movements are getting stronger and stronger. We are not as far as Hungary is nowadays, but we are nor are we safe from their growing stronger impact. Just now, it's 25 years after the revolution. We call it revolution after the turnover this year, and the anti-communist consensus has worn off. It's crumbling, and it doesn't work anymore for society. And unfortunately, during the 25 years, this anti-communist consensus was not used in such a way as to educate, as to promote the ideas of free and independent society. So the state of Czech Republic 25 years after is not a good one, and well, I'm among those who are trying to do their best, but unfortunately, one can never be sure how this very, very small state will work in this very, very big world. One of those very, very unfortunate moments was the split of Czechoslovakia in two states. The Slovaks see it differently, but for the Czechs it was very, very unfortunate, because now we are extremely small and extremely self-centered. I don't know, how did you feel here?
After hearing our tour guide's opinion of Milos Zeman, the current president of the Czech Republic, and knowing of Professor Bartlova's mother's involvement in politics, we decided to ask Professor Bartlova for her opinion of the current president.
I was in fact, I appeared in fact in the TV ad of his opponent, of this president. So, well, President Zeman has been elected by the approximate half of people in this country who cherish his being very, what's the proper word? Very folksy, very low level manners, very rude manners. That's what he presents. That's his image, and about 55% of people in this country love to have such a president. This is what is called a typical Czech tendency toward plebeian culture, not aristocratic, not intellectual, not elite. Elite and elite is still a bad word in this country. This is a very, very strongly plebeian culture, and he aimed precisely at these voters, and he succeeded. But he's, for instance, he's alcoholic. He's a just normal alcoholic. He announces it openly. That the doctors say it. Yeah, he drinks that and that and that and that, which is in the level of alcoholic. He has, when he has appeared a year ago in a very ceremonial moment of the when it was presented the coronation jewels in the St. Vitus Cathedral, where you have been, he appeared there so drunk that he couldn't manage. And no problem. There are still so many people in this country, about half of them, you know, it's 50-50. Who feel, well, he's one of us, and that's great. So that's it. Well, one of our, well, hopes, we can quite, it is quite possible that his health will not take it. He has a quite poor health, mostly because it's due to his heavy drinking for 15-20 years. So we may have another election soon. The problem is that he is the first directly elected president, and he personally thinks that it gives him more legitimacy, which is not correct in relation to the basic laws, but he thinks it, and the situation is really unpleasant. Many people hoped that after Václav Klaus, the previous president, will leave, it will be much better, because he did. You may have noticed his famous YouTube scene of stealing the pen in Chile. No, try to find it at YouTube. It's the pen in Chile. President Václav Klaus, and you will see what happens.
But now you're hearing Pink Panther music because we're going to talk about the Great Pen Caper. It's the heist everyone's been watching online, but was it a moment of a world leader's kleptomania, or was it something else? You make the call. You may have seen it. It's the Czech president at a signing, eyeing a pen. It's apparently crusted in semi-precious stones.
And he is liking what he sees.
And he's nodding his head. Oh, the right hand goes under the table. Where'd it go? Pen? What pen? Oh.
It's a little bit of a clue.
Right in the left pocket.
Meanwhile, the Chilean president's going on and on. Oh,
what I love about it is the guy thinks, Václav Klaus, the Czech president, thinks no one notices. Hey, I'm not doing anything. It's okay. It's cool.
Closes
the
box
pen
for
box.
evidence. Now you see it, now you don't.
Slick. Now that we're seeing those arrows there, because this was all played on Czech TV.
The most frequented piece of information about the Czech Republic on the internet during the last 3 years. It was the previous president who stole the pen before the cameras. So many people hope that the new president will be better, but unfortunately not. But it is quite clear that this current president, embodies the preferences and ideas of at least half of the inhabitants. So it's democratic that he is the president.
Off the camera, Professor Bartlová asked us what we thought of the current state of the Czech Republic. When we responded that we could sense some instability, Professor Bartlová replied with a head nod and suggested that more changes to the political arena of the Czech Republic still needed to occur. Overall, Professor Bartlová's meeting with the group provided us with excellent insight into the past and present state of the Czech Republic. Her interview also presented us with another wonderful parallel between the Wofford interim trips of 1969 and 2014 to Prague. Hopefully, in the future, additional Wofford students will travel to Prague to see how the Czech Republic will continue to grow and evolve to become a thriving nation.